Let's talk a bit more about vocab and context questions. These are those questions where they pick a particular word from the passage and you have to find the word that most nearly means it. That's the best synonym for that word in context. This is where you get a little bit of the vocabulary, but typically it's not going to be about fancy words like, oh, I don't know, fancy words like idiosyncratic, that if you don't know the definition, you're in trouble, right? That's not really going to be the major issue here. The major issue is about shades of meaning. A word like convey can convey different kinds of meanings depending on the context, and that's what this is all about. A few notes. We talked about this a little bit when we went through these questions, but let me make it a bit more formal here. On the first level, the choice that you pick has got to be a synonym of the target word. If this word doesn't fit at all, like if they don't go together in any kind of universe, if convey and one of these choices, they're not even shades of meaning of each other, they're barely synonyms, really unlikely that that's going to be the answer, right? They have to be at least synonymous in some way. So for example, if we look at this question here, let's see, perhaps givers believe that bigger, i.e. more expensive gifts convey stronger signals of thoughtfulness and consideration. So remember, our strategy here is we're going to try to put in our own word, and our own word previously, I believe, was communicate, which ended up being the answer, which happens sometimes when you come up with your own word. You actually find the word in the choices. But let's just hold that aside, because what I want to really look at here is the choice C. We talked about this one when we went through the question. The problem with C, exchange, it kind of fails the first test. Convey and exchange aren't really synonymous, right? Exchange implies a two-way relationship, whereas convey implies a one-way relationship, right? Something going from point A to point B, rather than in exchange, something moving between A and B. So C kind of fails the first test, and for that reason, we're going to be a little hesitant to pick it. It also fails the second test, so really the most important one, that the choice must work in context. And this is where plugging in our own word comes into play. Does exchange mean something like communicate? Well, on some level, maybe, right? If you're communicating, you're exchanging ideas. It's a little bit of a stretch, though, because directly speaking, exchange and communicate they're not easily used synonymously, right? I communicated my displeasure to my friend. I exchanged my displeasure to my friend. That's bizarre. It doesn't really make any sense. So in any event, exchange would fail both 1 and 2 for that reason, as would other choices. So B here would fail. Counteract. Perhaps givers believe that bigger gifts counteract stronger signals of thoughtfulness. Now, wait a minute. That's completely the opposite of what we were looking for here, right? We're looking for something more like communicate. So this just doesn't make sense in context. The final test is insert the choice into the sentence and ask yourself, does it sound right? What I mean by this, it's almost a grammatical issue, right? About standard usage. Can this word be used in this sentence in standard English? Does it make even a basic kind of sense to use the word? And I think A is a good example of it here. Perhaps givers believe that bigger gifts transport stronger signals of thoughtfulness. So wait a minute, do you transport signals of thoughtfulness and consideration? It's just weird. It doesn't really make any sense. So for that reason, as well as choice 2, or as well as reason 2, that it doesn't work in context, we can get rid of choice A. So here we're going to go with D. Of course, it was the word we plugged in, but notice it passes all three. To convey and to communicate, those are synonyms, right? You can convey something to somebody. That means to communicate to them. The choice definitely works in context, because here it's about how the gift signal or convey or communicate something to the gift receiver. And of course, it sounds perfectly fine. Perhaps givers believe that bigger gifts communicate stronger signals of thoughtfulness. Great. So these are your 3 criteria you can use to evaluate. Most of the time, these questions aren't too bad. You want to avoid overthinking it. Usually, you can get rid of 2 choices that are just out of left field. Usually, if it's a tougher question, you'll be stuck between 2, and then you can use these criteria to help you evaluate.